As you all know, we're all just finding out that former President Joe Biden was in massive cognitive decline while president. Okay, we all saw it and have been talking about it for many years. However, the book Original Sin by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson finally got the mainstream media to acknowledge Biden's glaring decline we all saw for over a half a decade.
I am absolutely positive that no one that I'm aware of ever has been made aware of any complaint, a formal complaint made by, or a complaint by Tara Reade against me at the time this allegedly happened 27 years ago, or until I announced for I guess it was in April or May of this year.
Allegedly happened? He's talking like his own mentally declining lawyer.
Now, 5 years later, with also a little bit better hair, we're going to reveal through psychology and body language the great lengths the Biden White House took to gaslight you into believing their lies, to cover up Joe Biden's massive cognitive decline and their apparent desperate attempt to stay in power. Now, let's get started.
The biggest political cover-up in American history.
The cover-up of Mr. Biden's mental decline will go down as one of the great scandals of modern politics. By refusing to admit what voters could so clearly see,
was called nothing more than a conspiracy theory.
Jackie, are you here? Where's Jackie?
Asking for Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, who had died in a car crash 7 weeks earlier,
are being referred to as cheap fakes.
They're cheap. They're just distorted, out of context videos, chopped up.
Your network at every turn was telling us those were, quote, cheap fakes. CNN was actively misleading us on what our very eyes were showing us.
Yes, that's called gaslighting. It's a psychological tactic of manipulation where they intentionally cause you to doubt your own perception, memory, or reality. In this case, it involved downplaying or outright denying the obvious and clearly visible signs of Biden's cognitive decline. They apparently did this to maintain a narrative that he was fine and we were all just overreacting. The word gaslight originates from the 1938 play Gaslight, which was then turned into a famous 1944 movie with Charles Boyer.
Paula, I hope you're not starting to imagine things again.
I'm telling you now, I'm frightened of the house. Gregory, are you trying to tell me I'm insane?
In the play, the man manipulates his wife into questioning her reality by dimming the gaslights and denying it ever happened, causing her to gradually doubt her own sanity and become more dependent on him, making her easier to control. We all witnessed Biden's mental decline with our own eyes and ears, but we were constantly told not to believe what we saw.
He's sharp physically. I mean, mentally.
Yeah.
I think the question is physically, right?
The Democrats have been involved in a big cover-up here.
Calling it a cover-up, it's a pretty strong word.
What we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You have
to
no
watch somebody on stage search for
It's so amazing. It's so amazing to me
and try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
She saw something that I did not see at the time.
Yes, it's extremely frustrating and quite curious that the mainstream media is so late to this. However, because the mainstream media has access to insider connections within the Biden White House, the elaborate cover-up they exposed once they finally decided to do real journalism appears to be more than just public deception, where in fact it may actually be unconstitutional.
You didn't follow up on the fact that he was falling up the stairs.
That's correct, I didn't. I look back at my coverage with humility.
This appears to be the biggest political cover-up of the century, because it's not just really annoying that they were attempting to gaslight us all into believing their bogus lies, but it also creates a significant constitutional crisis. Whether his aides easily coerced or manipulated him into signing certain things that he wouldn't normally sign, but didn't have the capacity to see through their manipulation. Also, if Biden's mental decline was that severe, did he truly have the capacity to understand what he was signing and approving?
We were covering all of these. It wasn't just falling down, it was getting lost. He was losing his train of thought regularly.
How would you say your mental focus is?
Oh, it's focused. I haven't, look, I have trouble even mentioning even saying to myself, my own head, the number of years. I no more think of myself as being as old as I am than fly.
Slurring.
These are yachts, they're luxury homes, and other ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. I am very willing to let the American public judge my physical and mental my physical as well as my mental fitness.
That he was incomprehensible.
Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. The phone. Make sure the kids hear words. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. You know how we talk about it. Are we the people? From the time I got to the Senate 180 years ago, as well as my tenure as vice president.
And with this clip here, notice Kamala Harris's uneasy body language when she realizes that Joe Biden said the wrong nation.
But he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom.
That he was getting lost on the White House lawn.
Secret Service agents just like flagging him in to the White House to make sure he doesn't wander off. It just shows that the people around him know that there is a little bit of a problem.
You sat right across from him and you asked none of that. It was some of the stuff you report in your book, we knew and we were reporting on, like the multi-jump cuts.
Some say Jake Tapper here, who is also a CNN commentator, is just in CYA mode. While that may be part of it, I think Jake Tapper is just an opportunist. Now that the election is over and there's no real political risk of swaying the election, he seems to want to position himself at the forefront of exposing what is likely the biggest political cover-up of this century. And with his many sources in the Biden White House, he has direct access to insider accounts of what really happened.
It was clear to us that he was using teleprompter.
Has Joe Biden ever used a teleprompter during local interviews or to answer Q&A with supporters?
Brett, we are not going to engage. This is straight from the Trump campaign.
But yeah, they're using it, but you can't answer the question.
President Biden was photographed holding a cheat sheet during his press conference yesterday. The card also includes her question.
All of which the White House was denying. Now, with the current White House, I have some connections. With the Joe Biden White House, I had none. But you did.
It's often forgotten that presidential access is a major media currency that the White House can use for manipulation. For example, if NBC journalists start asking questions about Biden's health, they may be blacklisted from receiving interviews with the president, First Lady, cabinet officials, and White House staff. They may not be invited into the Oval Office, invited to exclusive dinners, and called on to ask questions during press conferences. This is one of the ways the White House can bully media networks into compliance. And yes, media like Fox News was asking about Biden's health for years, but they were already basically blacklisted by the Biden White House, and they were never going to be on their Christmas card mailing list. However, the legacy media were all competing with one another to be top White House pet, to get exclusive interviews and special treatment.
Had been reporting in depth on his multiple problems and the obvious lies we were being told for years. For years. You really want the audience to believe you were fooled?
Now our great speech. In 2.8 seconds, Joe Biden has his hand out again, ready for a handshake. This is not like, hey, next day, hey, yeah, when was my hand shook? Oh, when was that? It just happened, and he doesn't remember. He already has his hand out. And of course, if you look at his body language, he's totally confused of why Chuck Schumer wouldn't want to shake his hand, stroking his chin and a smile and a little bit of embarrassment.
The people at the White House, when I would call, when others would call, when Alex would call, would lie. He's fine. He's fine. You'd call Democrats and say, what are you seeing behind the scenes here? Because this is concerning. He's fine. He's fine.
He is as sharp as ever.
The Biden campaign and White House operatives now had a modus operandi for attacking any journalist who covered any questions about the president's age, enlisting a core of social media influencers, progressive reporters, and Democratic operatives. The goal was to shame journalists and create a disincentive structure for those curious about the president's condition.
It's quite laughable that they brought in social media influencers like Harry Sisson to try to convince young Americans that Biden is definitely not in cognitive decline.
hear a lot of great things about you.
I hear a lot of great things about you, too.
Under normal circumstances, someone like Harry would never get media access to the President of the United States, but that was apparently part of their strategy to use social media influencers to fight the public narrative that Biden is in cognitive decline. By granting social media influencers access, they ensured that they would promote the administration's narrative, and of course, people like Harry would only continue to receive that kind of exclusive access as long as he kept dismissing concerns about Biden's mental fitness.
All the cognitive issues that you brought up, if that were a loved one, you would take them to some sort of doctor. What's going on here? Don't think that the Biden people did that. Not because they didn't see it, but because they didn't want to know.
This story is next level. There's everything in this. There's wide corruption, coercion, and manipulation that impacts the entire planet, unconstitutionality, and also possible elder abuse.
Why would you not give President Biden a cognitive test? Well, because you don't want to know the answer.
They apparently sadly let Joe Biden suffer in a multitude of ways, including withholding medical diagnosis and care, but also letting him suffer publicly through repeated moments of confusion, visible cognitive decline, and national embarrassment.
All he had to do was win, and he only had to show occasional signs of proof of life. There was a very sincere belief that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. And if you believe that, it's very easy to justify anything.
If they knew of these healthcare issues and withheld proper medical care for political expediency, that could be a criminal offense.
There was fear, and you could call it cowardice, among many, many Democratic lawmakers.
I don't think you needed to see anything secret or private to see mental decline. Do you not agree with that?
Well, I think that, again, I have not made a personal assessment.
Clearly, political expediency was a major factor here, where they thought only Joe Biden, a presidential incumbent, could beat Donald Trump.
We're live from Georgia. I'm Jake Tapper. Dana and I will co-moderate this evening.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person.
It was a few minutes in.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with.
He just completely lost his train of thought.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
We finally beat Medicare. It was really shocking. We have iPads, because you can't communicate, obviously, talking to your control room. I wrote, holy smokes. Now, what I was thinking was, holy f***. I mean, it was just shocking. Dana writes to me on a piece of paper, he just lost the election.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
In the debate, the truth about Biden's cognitive decline was finally visible for the entire nation to see, without the distortion of the Biden White House and the media. In the debate, he showed slow response time, rambling speech, reduced vocal volume, limited facial movement and expression, staring into space, and frequent word mix-ups. From a neuropsychology perspective, these are not just slip-ups, they're clinical warning signs of severe cognitive issues. Slow thinking and disorganized speech suggest... Where's my brain? Here's my brain. Slow thinking and disorganized speech suggest impaired executive function, likely linked to the frontal lobe. Word finding difficulties, mispronunciations, and sentence confusion suggest possible language impairments involving Broca's area in the frontal lobe and Wernicke's area in the temporal lobe. Reduced facial expression and soft voice may indicate subcortical involvement, such as dysfunction in the basal ganglia. Therefore, this doesn't suggest a small benign brain tumor or a localized lesion, but rather points to a widespread and progressive neurological condition affecting multiple brain systems. The combination of cognitive, language, and motor systems is consistent with possible neurodegenerative diseases.
For Trump, given what was going on to his left, he was fairly restrained. He wasn't really commenting on the self-immolation that was going on. I think he only made one comment that night about Biden's incoherence.
And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
The worst debate in the history of presidential debates going back to 1960. I just can't think of anything even remotely close to it.
I was 8 handicapped. Yeah. 8. But I had, how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
But let's
not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to
Let's not act like children.
In psychology, we often talk about baseline to understand changes in cognitive or behavioral functioning over time. And Joe Biden is arguably the most experienced politician our country has ever had.
I think they could broaden the gap significantly because if you notice from those polls that have been taken, there's a significant portion of undecided voters.
He served as U.S. Senator for 36 years, Vice President for 8 years, and then became president. When he first ran for the U.S. Senate, he ran on a platform to pull the U.S. out of the Vietnam War. That's how long he was in the U.S. Senate. On paper, Biden has more experience professionally debating politics than basically anyone in American history.
My dad used to have an expression. He'd say, "Champ, when you get knocked down, get up." Well, it's time for America to get up together. America's ready, you're ready, I'm ready, and Barack Obama is ready to be the next president of the United States of America.
So there's no reason other than a major cognitive decline that can explain what we saw in this debate and for his entire presidency.
Saw him immediately after, you write in the book, and he seemed like unaware that something extremely problematic had just occurred.
Jill helps him down from the stage. It's like a one-step stage. They come over, and they really didn't seem to have any idea that this had been as bad as it was.
Why do you think they didn't realize how bad his performance was? Yes, it's likely because Joe Biden was acting that way for some time, and Jill has grown accustomed to seeing him like that behind closed doors.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question.
We all saw the debate June 27th. We were all shocked. We were all stunned. And Alex and I set out to figure out what happened. There were definitely people in his administration after the debate who wondered who was actually running the country.
If that debate had not happened, or if Joe Biden had not had a bad debate that night, this whole charade would have continued all the way through Election Day. Staffers would have kept lying. The media would have kept reporting it and saying, oh, he's fine.
The Biden inner circle's efforts to hide his decline, including the campaign staged a fake town hall to quell concerns about his age and ability to interact with people.
Now watch this clip and see if you think this event was staged.
Imagine what we can do next. 4 more years. Pause.
4 more years. 4 more years.
Yes, the audience seemed to have been comprised of mostly Biden campaign workers who knew the speech because when Biden read the instructions for the audience,
4 more years,
the audience curiously quickly knew to jump in chanting 4 more years.
4 more years. 4 more years.
However, the campaign workers, who was mostly the audience, appeared so bored and disengaged watching Biden speak, they completely missed their cue to start chanting 4 more years, which was supposed to be chanted immediately after Biden said,
"Imagine what we can do next."
This fake town hall was in order to film it so they could make it into campaign commercials. So bad that campaign officials determined that it was not usable.
But everybody pushed off the notion that he used a wheelchair until after the election. This is all part of a larger whole where the Biden White House tried to hide the extent of his deterioration. They started putting aides around him as he walked to Marine One, the helicopter. That was to kind of hide from public view how bad his gait was, how bad his walking was, his shuffling. The White House was lying, not only to the press, not only to the public, but they were lying to members of their own cabinet.
4 cabinet secretaries told them, quote, "The cabinet meetings were terrible. I hated the scripts for these meetings. You want people to tell you the truth and have a real dialogue? Those meetings were not that."
His close aides and family members start really sequestering him off from even members of his own cabinet, administration, Democratic officials, donors, because of these moments of non-functioning Biden.
End of 2023, I think it becomes clear that there is a bigger issue than just him struggling in ways beyond sort of normal principle, and that there's actually a decline in his ability to do the job.
It's President Biden's cheat sheet. He literally tipped his hand, showing a card with step-by-step instructions. You enter the Roosevelt room and say hello. You take your seat. You give brief comments. You thank participants. you depart.
Who was running the show? Well, according to one cabinet secretary, it was Biden's aides who held all the power.
Now we have the constitutional question of who was actually head of the executive branch of government for 4 years.
These aides were not even Senate confirmed aides. These are White House aides. These were unelected people. And
we really didn't have a president that was really operating our country, and we know that an auto pen was running our country.
Hearing that he used the auto pen to sign executive orders, right? Issuing pardons.
Yes, there's a curious thing called an auto pen. But what exactly is it? This whole cover-up gets way more problematic because an auto pen is a physical machine that actually replicates the president's signature.
It's a device that uses a pen to recreate signatures or handwriting, even if the, quote, signer is not in the room.
Therefore, how much of what Biden signed was not actually approved by him, which includes many executive orders and even pardons?
And he was pardoning these folks even though they hadn't been convicted of a crime. It just doesn't add up.
He just had to win, and then he could disappear for 4 years. He'd only have to show proof of life every once in a while.
This is about our democracy. We will drag this infirm old man across the finish line if it kills us.
The Politburo did this. It refers to a small group of the most senior Biden advisors. This is Joe Biden, longtime consultants Mike Donilon and Steve Ricchetti, the gatekeepers to Biden.
Do you remember the 1993 movie Dave?
Something has happened to the president. We need them to feel like he's sitting right here in this chair.
Can't you die from a stroke like everybody else?
And is now on life support, so the president's aides secretly ask the local presidential look-alike comedian to fill in as president. But those aides were calling all the shots behind the scenes, and Dave was just a figurehead.
What do you think you're doing?
You mean the press conference? I have a couple of ideas I wanted to share with the country.
You don't call a press conference. I call a press conference.
That's what all this reminds me of. Have you seen that movie? If you haven't, you may want to see it, but it's also a very 90s movie, so you may not like it. Biden was the president, mostly just a name, but First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, Mike Donilon, Steve Ricchetti, and maybe one or two others appear to have been actually running our country.
They are denying the reality of the situation that lots and lots of Democratic elected officials, cabinet members in the Biden administration, the media were coming to them with, which is Joe Biden appears to be faltering physically and mentally.
This is Mike Donilon, Biden's chief campaign strategist. Yes, one of Biden's top unelected aides that were apparently calling the shots and was part of Biden's Politburo.
I watched him every day.
Now see if you think Mike Donilon is truthful here, and then we'll break down his body language and chosen words.
Biden was mentally impaired. I didn't see that. And I sat in a room with him for hours and hours. I don't know how much time any of those people spent with Biden. I know how much time I spent with him. I know what I saw.
Is he just lying?
Yes, there appears to be deception here. First, when he's talking about that, we notice some odd defensive shoulder rises and shrugs to subconsciously protect the vulnerable neck in fear, which may indicate he does not fully believe what he's saying. Also, if you notice how he talks about Biden being mentally impaired and says he did not see that, as opposed to being more direct by saying Biden was not mentally impaired. Imagine if someone were to call your smart, successful friend mentally impaired. Would you ever say,
I didn't see that?
No, you probably wouldn't, but instead reply with something like, she's not mentally impaired at all. Even if you're not a neuropsychologist to clinically evaluate your friend, you would still vigorously defend them because the accusation of them being mentally impaired is so bogus and offensive towards your friend. However, Mr. Donilon is not doing that at all. Now, watch this part.
I know how much time I spent with him. I know what I saw.
And then Mike Donilon goes on to generally tell you that he knows what he saw, but never gives any specifics of what he saw. Those specifics are difficult to credibly fabricate. But he doesn't give them. Do you think Mike Donilon needs to be questioned by Congress under oath?
The White House doctor should have to testify under oath. He should have to submit his White House medical records under threat of perjury.
This Politburo cared more about protecting their access to power by keeping Joe Biden in power than they did about the Democratic Party or the country. It's hard to think of Biden as malicious or Machiavellian or anything. He's kind of an afterthought while this Politburo is making these decisions about him and about the country almost without him.
This small group of unelected Biden aides were apparently running the day-to-day activities of our country. That's quite alarming, and even more alarming that they were apparently completely on board for Biden to run for re-election. This was not just getting him through to the end of his term, but they apparently wanted to remain in power for up to another 4 years, because as what was reported, all they needed was to occasionally show us signs that Biden was still alive. This is all like a movie.
There was a feeling among some in the resident staff that this was about hiding his deterioration. And we quote one resident staff, paraphrasing, he would just sometimes look at you like he didn't even know you, even though I was seeing him every day.
The non-functioning Joe Biden really started rearing his head around 2015. After the death of his son, Beau.
Before Beau died, he was 100% sharper, said one senior Biden White House official. Beau's death wrecked him. Part of him died that never came back after Beau died.
Joe Biden's cognitive decline appears to have been sadly worsened after his son's death due to the profound psychological trauma and stress, which can negatively impact memory, focus, and executive functioning. In older adults, grief and depression can accelerate or unmask underlying cognitive decline, especially if there were already some neurodegeneration. What may have once been subtle became more pronounced as his cognitive reserve was overwhelmed by the emotional toll of the tragic loss.
Can't follow his train of thought, can't come up with names, can't remember dates, what you listen to in the Her Report.
2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying.
Beau's death is obviously tragic, but that happened in 2015, where he's like unsure of when his son deployed, unsure of when his son died. President Biden blames Robert Hur for bringing up Beau's death. Robert Hur, as you heard, did not bring up Beau's death.
Robert Hur recommended no criminal prosecutions, but he did refer to the president's memory at least 9 times, saying that it was significantly limited and appeared hazy, that he was, quote, a well-meaning elderly man with poor memory.
That is, if anything, a charitable version, and yet the Democratic establishment, led by President Biden, also Vice President Kamala Harris and others, went after Robert Hur.
Now, see if you notice any signs of deception here from Vice President Harris.
The way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated.
Yes, we notice many out-of-place defensive shoulder shrugs and atypical over-animation in what is called convincing and not just conveying. There appears to be fear associated with deception in her response.
And clearly politically motivated.
Also, do you notice anything else? You can put that in the comments below.
Madam Vice President, are you really telling the American people that you saw something on June 27th that you had never seen before?
It does appear she saw similar things with Biden daily that we all saw during the presidential debate. And do you remember how she reacted when Biden said the completely wrong country in his speech?
The Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom.
That the 46th president is diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer.
It's very sad that former President Biden was diagnosed with cancer, and we wish him a quick recovery. However, was he really just diagnosed with advanced cancer the day before his tell-all book was released? Given the games his aides apparently played in the past with his health, there seems to be a high likelihood that he was screened for cancer earlier, and it was likely found maybe years ago. This may have been something else his aides were trying to hide from us while he was in office to protect his image and make Biden appear healthier and more electable while in office. I think they were waiting for just the right moment to reveal it to the public as a diversion tactic, shifting public attention away from more damaging revelations of what was actually going on in the Biden White House. What do you think?
That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer.
Now in the comments, what do you think about Biden's aides apparently running our country for those 4 years? Let everyone know in the comments below. Subscribe for more. A little bit longer video this time. There's gonna be a movie made about this. What do you think? And I think if Congress does go down the rabbit hole of questioning some of the people that worked in that Biden White House, I think it may be a real long rabbit hole where they're gonna find a lot of things that were not right, and it may have to go to the courts on whether or not some of the things that occurred were actually constitutional. Because, yeah, every president has advisors, but not every president has advisors using the auto pen to sign things if that's what occurred. I think the big part of all this is really highlighting the importance of being cognitively sound as president. Like, you have to be. On every single level, whether it's something you sign, whether it's working with people and not being manipulated by others, it's so important. You have to be cognitively sound, and it's just really concerning and really scary that Biden apparently wasn't for basically his entire presidency, and just makes you wonder what the heck was going on there. We'll have to see how all this turns out. See you next time.